If you've been stuck in a time loop for a while, are you actually going to be okay when you get out of it? I get to talk about a movie that I have been very excited to see for a while. I actually even publicly bemoaned the fact that I couldn't get out to LA for its premiere. And no, I wasn't able to see its premiere in the States or any of its festival showings, but I was sent a screener. So I am now able to talk about Again. Now, this is a movie that is the product of a lot of work. I've actually been following the making of this movie for a while because I follow the writer, director, and star, Mia Moore Merchant, in a number of places. And I've been aware of this project for quite a while. This is her debut feature film in any of those three roles, I believe. Definitely as a writer or director. She might have acted in something before. I'm actually not sure now that I'm trying to remember. But this is a very big deal. And oh boy, how do we start with this? Well, it would not be inaccurate to call it a time loop movie, but that would be very misleading to call it a time loop movie. This might be the first, at least to my awareness, the first ever post-time loop movie. In that, while we do get some flashes to some earlier points in the loops and get to see some specific things, this is mostly about what happens after the character of Agatha, played by Mia, comes out of the loop and what happens then. The other primary star of this is Aria Taylor, who's playing Tessa, who is Agatha's girlfriend. Tessa was not in the loop, but Agatha was. Now, I say Tessa was not in the loop. Tessa was present, but obviously she's been getting reset every time. And Agatha's been in this loop for about 10 years. But shortly after the film starts, the loop ends and she's out of it. And that's where most time loop stories finish, with the presumption that the character at the center of it has grown or learned something or is just relieved to be out of the loop. And while, yes, there's a certain amount of relief, there's also the sinking in of the realization that for the past 10 years, Agatha has always known what was going to happen. And yes, there's a sense of being trapped by that, but this is the first time in almost a decade where she doesn't know what happens next. It's the first time in almost a decade where what she does will have consequences that extend further than the current 24-hour period. And suddenly having that realization makes things messy. Messy is a good term for this. This is ultimately, more than anything, a romance. Now, people who follow me might hear that and think, oh no, she's going to hate it. This is worth me reminding folks that while I have a tendency to bemoan romantic subplots, that is because they frequently feel like an intrusion in a story that I usually feel doesn't need it and usually doesn't benefit from it. When a romance is the primary focus of something, I actually can get on board if it's done well. And this is done really well. And I really do appreciate the messiness of it. A lot of times, the messy parts of a romance, because there's always going to be some. Otherwise, you just have two characters who hook up and everything's great, the end. That's boring. There's always going to be something messy, be it logistical complications. One of them has like some circumstances that they're in, or some like he's too proud, like in your classic sort of bodice ripper sort of stuff, or one of them's married or whatever. There's usually some messiness, but it often has a sense of artificial imposition. Here, the messiness all feels incredibly rooted in the characters, their relationship, their history, their dynamic, and the gap between their experiences. So it's worth noting at this point that Mia is trans, and so is the character of Agatha. And it's important. Here's what I'm going to say. I hesitate to say that the movie is about being trans, at least, at its forward-facing. Subtextually, yes, a fair amount of it is. But I hesitate to say that it's a movie about being trans as much as it is a movie about queer and trans people. And you could tell a version of the story in which the characters aren't queer or trans, but it wouldn't be the same story. It is actually important, and it does matter to things, but Let me give you an example. This is something I think I can explain that has no spoilers in it to kind of give you a sense of what I mean. Agatha being trans is more than just, a fact of accommodating for the actress. It is deeply thematic for everything that goes on, and it brings additional meaning to what's going on. So the very first scene that we see is basically the end of the loop day with Tessa and Agatha talking as they've done thousands of times prior to this. And Agatha believing that it'll just reset in the morning, except this time it doesn't. But in the period in which she doesn't realize that she's about to wake up the next morning and come out of the loop, they're having this conversation. And there's this frustration that Tessa has because she feels like Agatha isn't letting her in to try and understand the experience that she's been having. And Agatha isn't really explaining or sharing much of that experience because she's tried again and again and again and again to explain, but she knows very well by this point that she can't relate it to anything that Tessa has ever experienced. Like, she can try and describe it, but the words are always going to be imperfect. It's not really what it's like. And Tessa just doesn't have the experiences to understand what it is that Agatha has been going through. And that, yeah, it's true of the time loop, but it's also true of a lot of transgender people and cisgender people who like or love them, trying to understand them, but, they'll have questions like, I want to understand you. You know how hard it is to explain to a cisgender person what it's like being trans? It's almost impossible because cisgender people simply do not have the kinds of feelings and experiences that are the core of why we are what we are. And for a cisgender person, that can actually be kind of frustrating if they feel like we're not letting them in. Whereas for us, it's like, I can try, but you're still not going to get there. And that sense of that gap is at the heart of that opening scene. And that's kind of what I mean by the queerness and the transness being very important to the movie. But like any good subtextual meaning, the movie still works. This just deepens it. You could remove the trans and queer aspects, but it would be a far, far shallower movie. It deepens everything, that these things have additional meanings. But unlike, say, the kind of movies that tick me off because they feel like they are just flat out being the metaphor or leaning on the metaphor to carry a story that doesn't otherwise work. I don't know why Sucker Punch is the movie coming to my head right now. No, I do. It's the quintessential version of that, but I don't know if anyone still remembers that. I got to pick another example. But this is a movie that is working on multiple levels, and they enhance each other and make the whole thing a deeper experience as you go through it. You can feel how intimate this is. And that intimacy very much leans into the fact that this was clearly a very low-budget movie, but it is one of the really beautiful examples that I can think of in recent memory of something that not only just leans into the fact and accepts that it has a low budget, this really feels like a movie that wouldn't benefit from more money. It's not just a matter of like, oh, we're tailoring it to our limitations. I'm not saying this is the case, but I get the impression coming away from seeing this that even if there was more money, there wouldn't be additional locations, sets. There wouldn't be added special effects because this story wouldn't benefit from any of that. It is small and yes, budget friendly, but it's small because it's intimate, because it is about these people and these connections. The time loop matters, but it's not the point. And all of that speaks to a very confident filmmaker. And some of the shot composition, like right from the first shot, actually, some of the shot composition in this is gorgeous. For want of some criticism, I will say that there's one or two supporting characters where you do feel the budget limitation in that, the pool of actors who would have been available in the area they were shooting to work for very little was probably pretty small. And I don't want to say that anyone was giving a bad performance, but Mia and Arya are giving such amazing naturalistic depth to what they do that when one or two of the supporting characters come across a little bit more stagey, it jumps out, not because it's bad on its own, but it's like, oh, that's not at the level of what I've gotten used to in this movie. Now, it doesn't derail it. As I said, this is a very small number, and it's not even like inherently a problem. And there are some very solid supporting performances in this. Abigail Thorne appears in it as well, also playing a trans character. So, like, I point that out just because, I don't know, I'm me and I can't stop myself from noting the one thing that, like, if I could tweak that, but that is kind of it. I don't want to talk about the back half of the movie because I really want to encourage people to honestly kind of have an experience similar to that of Agatha, which is to go in and maybe you think you know what time loop movies are, but you're going to go in and you're not going to know what's going to happen next, and neither does she. And that is terrifying and exciting and anxiety inducing and wonderful and terrible all at once. And this does such a good job of capturing that inner turmoil of a character and also understanding the way that impacts other people around her and how, yeah, she's going through something very personal and very specific to her, but at the same time, she's not the only thing going on. And even though she's lived for a decade in a world in which she could basically do whatever she wanted, wake up the next morning and, yeah, be stuck in the same routine, but could do whatever she wanted again and there wouldn't be lasting consequences, that's a big adjustment. And seeing the way that impacts her and impacts Tessa and impacts other people around them and their dynamic with each other, it's really beautiful. And as I said, it is beautifully messy. This is a depiction of a very loving but very messy relationship of people who clearly care about each other, but there are still fundamental gaps in their understanding of each other that they may not be able to bridge, or they may not be able to even figure out how to start trying to bridge it. And it's developed and presented in such a unique and confident way that I just really hope far more people get the chance to see this movie. Again, this almost in some ways feels tailor-made for me, because I've noted more than a few times that I tend to steer away from a lot of, queer movies. I put in quotes not because they're not actually queer, but so many things that are sold as like, oh, and this is a gay story or a trans story or a queer story. They're just, in my mind, they're generic dramas. Like, even aside from my current frustration with Russell T Davies, like, I don't have a lot of interest in watching Tiptoe. Like, I don't. It's not my genre. It's not something that I care to see. I like more fantastical ideas, and bringing in the notion of a time loop is a real good way to hook me in to a story like this and get me really invested. It had the hook that I needed to get me here, and I'm really, really glad I came and let it just take me away. I imagine most of you probably haven't seen this, but if you did get the chance, I'd love to hear from you. But whatever your thoughts are, or if there are any other queer movies that you feel like shouting out that you think should be seen more than they are, drop them down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, and subscribe. They all helped. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. Now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lipfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Claire Wright, Dave Hall, Snark Shark, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Daphne Matthews, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Twilord, Kay Johnston, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, Magdalena, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and a couple of additional names I'll have to dub in because I forgot to add them. And here I am with those dub names. Thank you to the Demon Bunny, Vin Jost, and Sarvis. I'm a little bit distracted, you might have noticed. Everyone's reintegrated. Don't worry about Navarro. He got rehoused. He's completely happy where he is. But this is the mischief now. And it's a lot.